Hi, everybody. Do we have everybody from the waiting room, we think, Lily, at this point?
Yeah, and I can keep letting people in as
Cool.
we go.
That's awesome. Great. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Adam Cheeseman. I work for Nature NB, and we're helping support the MBE and the New Brunswick Environmental Network in hosting today's webinar, which is part of our series, Learning from Connected Communities, an in-depth look at nature-based climate solutions in Atlantic Canada. Today's webinar is going to focus on learning about a couple different naturalized stormwater pond projects that have taken place in Southeast New Brunswick and are becoming more and more popular in other communities across the province and in Atlantic Canada. Just a few housekeeping items. So we do have simultaneous interpretation for English and French today as part of the webinar. And this is just a quick image to show where you can find that on your screen. So if you go to the bottom of your screen on Zoom, you'll be able to see the interpretation button, and you can click that. You can either have it off, which means you'll hear both languages. You can go on the English channel and hear just English, or French and hear just French. So just as a heads up about that service that we have for today. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge, of course, that the land and waters that we're talking about today and the work that is taking place takes place in the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Passamaquoddy peoples. And we just want to recognize this, and also if folks could, keep this in mind and think about this, context as we discuss climate change and discuss these nature-based approaches as we go through the day. In addition, this unceded traditional territory is managed by the Peace and Friendship Treaties, and so if you are not familiar with those, I encourage you to look into those on your own time after the webinar to learn a little bit about the various different relationships and the context there as well. I'm just going to pass it over for a moment to Lily from the MBEN just to introduce the New Brunswick Environmental Network and kind of the project that this webinar series is kind of taking place within. So Lily, I'll just pass it over to you for a second.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Adam mentioned, my name is Lily Barraclough, and I'm project coordinator with the New Brunswick Environmental Network, and work closely with Nature NB to host this webinar series. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, the New Brunswick Environmental Network is a communication network that links over 110 nonprofit environmental organizations. And we've done work in the past on nature-based climate solutions and building capacity and knowledge around them. And we're continuing to do that work through our current project under the Research and Knowledge Initiative, where we work with municipalities to help build capacity to implement nature-based climate solutions. And as Adam mentioned, this is a part of the Learning from Connected Communities webinar series. This is our 6th webinar in the series, and you can find the recordings in both languages of the past webinars on our YouTube channel. And we will have one more webinar at some point, likely in the early fall, which is looking at protected areas and conserving nature to respond to climate change. So recommend that you keep an eye out for that. And please do check out our past webinars and reach out if you have any questions or comments about them as well. So I hope you enjoy today's discussion, and thank you so much for being here.
Perfect, thanks, Lily. And I also just wanted to mention that we do have the MBEN staff available here monitoring the chat as well. So if anything comes up during the webinar, you need to ask questions or get some advice on audio or anything like that, feel free to post in the chat. And we will have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar as well. So just to get started, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Serge Dupuis. Serge is originally from Shediac, New Brunswick, and is a professor of civil engineering at the Université de Moncton since 2013, following a long career in municipal engineering, which started with the engineering firm SGE Group in Moncton, and most recently as the manager of engineering department at the City of Dieppe for 10 years. And Serge is going to talk to us about a naturalized stormwater pond project in Dieppe. So I will pass it over to you, Serge, if you want to share your screen, and we can get started from there.
Merci beaucoup, Adam. Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Adam.
Ma présentation sera en français.
My presentation will be in French. I hope you can see it now. Welcome, everyone. As Adam said, I'm Serge Dupuis. I'm a professor at the University of Moncton in civil engineering for 10 years now. And so before I was working for the City of Dieppe as a project engineer and director of engineering. And during that time, we worked on a really nice project that I'm very happy to discuss with you today. It is a naturalized retention basin that was built in a park, an industrial park in Dieppe. And so here we go with my presentation. I'll speak to you a little bit today about an introduction to the project, planning from the beginning to the end of our project. So from design to costs, construction, how it evolved over time as well, because it's been around for a little while now. And so that's kind of the beauty of this presentation, is that we can see into the future as well what your projects today will maybe look like in the future. And so we're going to look at maintenance of this type of a project and a conclusion as well. So I'm going to start. I'm going to share with Jamie Burke at Sackville, who has a nice project to present to us today as well. But my project started in 2002. So it's already been 20 years plus. And so I was a project engineer for the City of Dieppe at that time. And so that was the second year I was there. And it wasn't me who was the brainchild of this project. So I'll just give a shout out to my boss at the time, Jacques, who was the leader of the project, and he made the idea from the municipal side, or anyway, the city objective. Well, there's a big decision to take at that time, and I think at that time there was people had the initiative and sort of a vision for the future, and that they thought this could work, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. That's what we're going to see. We're going to talk about a case study of a naturalized stormwater retention basin project. So all the steps in this process, including the evolution. So I have also pictures from 17 years later, but of course now it's 21 years later. So my goal is for people who are residents and for city advisors and people who work for the municipality, when we take on such a project, well, often it's difficult, the day of, to make sort of financial decisions and planning decisions without knowing what this might look like. So my goal today is to sort of show you at the beginning what this can look like, what our challenges were and can be, and also the benefits that you reap at the end. Of course, this is a successful project, so it's a good model. So here you see an aerial photo of, we're in Dieppe. Here's Dieppe Boulevard that goes from north to south. We got Rue Aquatique here. If you go to the pool in Dieppe, it's just down here. And then here's Good Life Fitness for those who are interested in keeping in shape. And then here's the Crèmerie Benic, the dairy bar. I kind of like going here better than the gym, but anyway, it's not for everyone, right? The beauty of this is that our ponds, our retention ponds, are here, and so all the water comes in through a tube, a pipe here, into a first pond, and then it goes through a natural screen into a second pond, and then there's a third one here, and then it ends up in the fourth one, which is the finishing pond, and then it comes out here into a natural stream. And in this aerial stream, you can sort of see the stream, and I'm going to tell you about the construction and development and engineering sides of this, but also, natural concepts, existing ones, and protection, etc., etc. So this is kind of difficult to sort of go from development of the city and conserve nature as well as much as possible. And so in this project, I believe we were able to do that. And so around these various basins, you can see that there are pedestrian paths, and I'll tell you more about that in a bit. So in the first place, 20 years ago, we were speaking about planning, and the idea was that the industrial park in Dieppe, when we hear industrial park, we just think about bulldozing everything and clearing out a site and kind of breaking with nature. So for development, of course, development is necessary, but at the time, back in the day at the Ville de Dieppe, we tried to balance both of these. And so we collaborated with the City of Dieppe, with engineers, the municipal council, and people who were taking care of the industrial park as well. And now we know this as Expansion Dieppe. So we took on an engineer to do the designs. This is ADI Group, and now they're known as EXP. So we had engineers from that firm. And so we also had some architects, landscaping, BDA landscaping architects from Sussex. And these people know nature a little bit better, trees, etc. And so we put those people together with the engineers. So that wasn't always easy to work together because they have different goals often. But at the end of the day, the collaboration was good. We also hired Advanced Construction, a builder as well. So here's the first plan, the design plan that we have with BDA Landscape Architects. So we're going to see the difference between landscape architect's plan, and then you'll see the difference with an engineering plan, and you'll see the difference between the two. So we'll start with this one, the landscaping one. So at the time we had Champlain Street and the airport's up here. And this was a new street here, Boulevard Dieppe. And it kind of connects Rue Champlain all the way to Chartersville Road. And so all of this was wooded before. And so this is the perfect place to sort of expand this industrial park, if you can imagine. But at the time, the city said, well, we don't want this to just be asphalt. We want to be less polluting, and especially companies that can sort of respect nature. And so we had rows of trees between each of the ponds, between each of these lots here. And this was an existing lot, and there was also a racetrack here for horses. So if you remember, there was Barrio. There was another horse track down here, which is now half of our naturalized stormwater basin. And so this is, like I said, a racetrack. And we sort of brought it back to life but in a different form. So you can see that with the ponds, well, there's a stream that comes down here. And when we developed the land here, all the rainwater that comes down here will be stored up and will come down to the lowest point, which is the little stream down here. It's not a big one. It's 10 feet wide. So we didn't... Well, the impact on the road is serious, so we wanted to reduce this as much as possible. And so we decided to develop these naturalized basins and then to feed into the stream after. And so at the beginning, we had to continue to develop the other areas here. So like I said, there's a pool, and then we have a fourth basin over here as well. I'll talk to you about that in a second here. And since we developed this, there's a stormwater retention basin that's over here. But now it's just a little bit of grass. It's a little patch of grass, and so it's naturalized. It's no big deal. And so here we have naturalized basins, but they are also dry. And so dry basins usually they're always dry unless it rains. And so some of them are naturalized, some of them are not. And the one that I'm going to speak to you about today are wet basins that always have water in them. And then the water can obviously go up and down with rain, depending on rainwater. So these have trees around them and they're aquatic milieus. So first off, for those of who work at the municipality, the idea here was, well, when we develop land, well, we have to turn this into a green space. And at the time, it was 10% that needed to be green space. And so for municipalities, we had 1 year. But anyway, sometimes we have sort of requirements in this sense. And so then the second thing we had to do is we had to calculate all the runoff and the basin's capacity. We had to look at these, anyway, everything and all the infrastructure in the area, roofs of buildings, the new street, etc. And we had to see what the various different rates of flow in the basins were. And so this was 20% for, we had to consider 20% increase in this based on climate change. And so we talk about types of vegetation as well. When we're talking about naturalized basins, what type of vegetation needs to be in a basin? Is it, algae, or is it cat tails? Or so we, like I said, hired BDA Landscaping to look at this. They're experts and they know the vegetation, the aquatic vegetation in the area, and they sort of guided us on this. Then we wanted these aquatic plants be able to clean the water naturally. So it's not always clean water that comes down. This is water that's going through parking lots and sidewalks, etc. And so they have sediments in them, and sometimes there are pollutants in them as well. So can we help these waters to be healthier before it returns back into the natural system? So we already spoke to you about dry retention basins, naturalized or not, and then we also have, like I said, wet naturalized retention basins. And so here's the plan from the engineers, which is a little bit different. You see all of the buildings in black and the parking lots in gray. And often, well, we want, with development, you want like new things. We want to develop the city because unfortunately or happily, we compare development. Well, with we have to, the way that municipalities judge is basically on its development in the sense. So anyway, here you see the retention basins, and there's their apartments in here, and there's parking lots. So you have the gym over here. Here's new buildings over here. So general works is up here. And so there's a lot of development along this boulevard here. So all of the, like I said, all of the parking lots flow into this retention basin. And so when there's a lot of rain, this often goes into, well, this will go into the underground pipes, and then it comes out in we have 4 ponds, like I mentioned, and the first one is a sedimentation pond. And that first one, it always has water in it. I think it's 15 feet deep, the deepest of the 4 basins. And so this one slows down the water that comes in, and it allows the sediments and the earth, etc., to sort of settle on the bottom. There's always sedimentation that continues to happen, but the large sedimentation is in the first one, like I said. So this helps us clean these sediments out every 5, 6, 7 years. So physically, we have to go into the basins and clean that out. Clean out those sediments. Then the water continues to flow slowly through different pipes here, and depending on how much water there is, it can go up or down, and then it flows back into a small pipe here, which returns the vast majority of the water back into the system here. I showed you photos of the beginning and 17 years later to show you the difference. So at the time that we had built this, so this is what it looked like. It kind of looked like a man-made pond, not something natural. Then most of the projects look like this at the beginning. They're not very pretty. You know, here these black sections. This is where we wanted to plant. Well, this is where we planted various bushes and shrubs and trees, and this sort of grows naturally. So here, like I said, there are trees and shrubs, and the problem that we had at the beginning was, well, when we got it was over $100,000 just to plant these at the beginning, and as engineers, we were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that we're going to have to invest that amount of money into trees." So that's why I'm showing you this today. Another thing that you see here are aquatic plants. So we had increased the level of the soil as well, and we planted aquatic plants in here so that the water could flow through them. And then 17 years later, this is what it looks like. So all the trees grew up, all of the aquatic plants are there. Another photo here of the exit. 20 years ago, we had this pedestrian trail here. You can see the algae, or the aquatic plants that are here, and then here, there's some trees growing, but here's the photo 17 years later. So look at all these trees all around here. You can't even see the pond here anymore, and you see the bridge and the picnic tables. And so here's the water flowing from one pond to the other, and you can even see the little conifers that we planted here. 6 of them. Look here, 20 years later, 17 years later, well, here they are. There's even a few additional ones. There are 8 of them. Same thing here. You see the pond? It was nice at the time, but 20 years later, it looks like this. So even with the buildings that they built, well, yes, there are cattails here. It's very, very beautiful. So the cost of construction, $300,000, 90,000 in vegetation. So 20 years ago, it was about $500,000. And this is what it's led to today. So here we have our pedestrian trails, and so this is nice to have a place to walk. People walk here all the time. This is good as well, so that the public works vehicles can come down here as well. So that's helpful. Lastly, I'll show you the little stream that the water flows into. So all of the water flows back into this. This is the stream in 2017. So there was a lot of rain actually the day before. So here's the day before and here's the day after. So there's an increase in the water level, but not enough so that it sort of erodes the banks. So there's not a huge difference in level. Like I said, it remains natural. It's in a natural state. So here's the before and after again. You can't even really all the water from the industrial park is flowing into here. Another photo, a before and after. Rain. Here you see algae or the vegetation, and so it kind of goes up temporarily after rainfall, and then it slowly flows out. And so we also control the quantity of water, but we also control the quality of the area. So in conclusion, the benefits of naturalizing a basin, of course, it costs more money, but you see, yes, of course, you get the aesthetics. You can add paths, you can add little relaxation spaces, picnic tables. You got flora and fauna that's diversified. Like I said, cattails, etc. You can protect the original stream. sediments and pollutants are deposited and then can be cleaned after, and then the vegetation filters the water that comes through the stream. And with this, on that, I will thank you for your time and for letting us share our project today. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Serge. And just as a reminder to everybody, we'll do a question and answer period after both presentations, but if anybody has anything they're thinking about, feel free to put it in the chat if you don't want to forget, and we can come back to it for sure. So thanks a lot, Serge, that was great. And those before and after pictures after all those years are really, really cool to see. So we're going to transition to talk about another naturalized stormwater pond project, not too far from this one that we were just talking about. So Jamie Burke's with us, formerly with the town of Sackville, to talk about Sackville Stormwater Retention Pond. Jamie is now the Atlantic lead for urban planning and a project manager with Stantec's Ottawa and Atlantic Community Development Team based in Moncton. Jamie, as I mentioned before, was the former CAO or Chief Administrative Officer of the town of Sackville, and has held several senior positions in municipal government, including senior manager of corporate projects with the town of Sackville, senior planner with the City of Moncton and the Greater Moncton Planning District Commission, and planning roles with the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency and the Eastern District Planning Commission. Jamie has a Master's of Environmental Studies and Planning from York University, Bachelor of Science from Mount Allison University, and is currently undertaking training in urban design with the American Planning Association. Jamie's on the board of directors for the Atlantic Planners Institute and Friends of Fundy, is the former president of the New Brunswick Association of Planners, and has served on several committees with the Canadian Institute of Planners. He's a part-time lecturer at Mount Allison University and a registered professional planner in New Brunswick, and is a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners. So welcome, Jamie, and thanks for joining us today. And feel free to take over to talk about the story in Sackville.
Thanks, Adam. Can you hear me okay? Can you see the slides?
Yep, the slides are not in presenter mode, but we can see them. Yeah, perfect.
Great. So thanks, Adam, and thanks everyone for attending today. It's always a pleasure to present with Serge. We've done this kind of tag team a number of times now. So Serge, good to see you again, and always love hearing about your retention ponds in the city of Dieppe during your time there. So like Serge, our project in Sackville was also freshwater management, which I'll talk a little bit about through the slide deck today. But generally speaking, I'm going to start by putting things in the Sackville context. I'll kind of skip through some major challenges and actions that were taken, and then while we're kind of talking about the project, I'm going to kind of weave in some of the natural approaches, I guess, why we chose to do this, and some of the, I guess, extra features that we implemented along the way. So just briefly, probably not a surprise to anybody on the call here today, but Sackville has been battling flooding for years. We geographically we're a low-lying coastal region that's susceptible to climate change. So the community is protected by dikes, about almost 4.5 kilometers in the former town of Sackville, and then 16.5 just outside the former municipal boundary. There's major transportation corridors running right through the Shediac Isthmus, which has been popular, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So traffic, rail, and electricity, all of which is considered to be national critical infrastructure. The town is it's always been flooding, both from being inundated with saltwater flooding because of the Bay of Fundy, but more recently, I guess the community's paid more attention to freshwater flooding, and 24% of the former town municipal boundary was in the floodplain. So I think that's an important stat to note. I said saltwater flooding is also imminent, but there's this little microclimate that we call in Tantramar here, where it's because of the Tantramar Marsh does some wild and but wonderful things. And so high wind, highway closures because of either wind velocities or visibility due to snow. And all of these, I guess, climate change related impacts were clearly laid out in a climate change adaptation plan for the town, which is where we largely got our marching orders to proceed with a project like this. So just to put things in general perspective, I guess you can see the red pin, which is where Sackville is, and you can see Allac and Fort Lawrence towards the right-hand side of the screen, and that line, which is the highway, the Trans-Canada Highway, that for the most part, that's also the CN rail line. So that is really the protection through the isthmus and that mass amount of fields, but also the critical infrastructure that runs through it. So in terms of our project in Sackville, we started early. We started back in 2016, kind of preparing for this, and we did a variety of things from in terms of public engagement. One of the most, I guess, innovative was that we rented the local theater and kind of, instead of advertising the movie, we had people come in and talk about emergency management. And that's where we really started talking about, is our community ready? What do we need to do to be able to accommodate and adapt and live through some of these realities? So the photos that you're seeing here are directly related to the naturalized stormwater retention pond that we're going to talk about. This is the Lawrence Street area. So this is the lowest part of the drainage basin within the overall community. So we've got hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of drainage basin, which all comes and leads to this lowest point. We have a variety of commercial businesses in this activity. We've got the Sackville Legion, Strutt's Gallery, all of the town's major recreational infrastructure, outdoor recreational infrastructure is in this location, in addition to some residential uses. So a variety of an aerial mismatch of uses there, but it came as no surprise. These are snapshots from the, I guess, the last giant flood of 1962, and you can see that same area again underwater. You can see in this image behind the car the top of the CN signage. That's just gives you a little bit of an idea of how deep the water was back when the community flooded. So in Sackville, it's a little different, I guess, for the stormwater pond that Serge was talking to. So we're both protected by the dikes here in Sackville, but we're also we're hamstrung by them. So when the tide comes in, for those of you who don't know, that in the dike is a chamber, almost like a pipe, what we've called a navito. And it's old Acadian engineering. We still rely on it today, but when the tide comes in, it closes basically a flapper gate, which is a big metal gate on the abido, and that holds the salt water out. Then when the tide leaves, that head of the pressure from the fresh water that's built up, maybe it's snow melt, maybe it's rain, that pushes that gate open and allows the fresh water to get out to sea. So that engineering practice is still what we rely on to be able to drain the community. And I guess the tipping point in our problem was we had a big flood in I think 2014. The CN rail line was flooded completely, and CN actually dispersed 2 individuals to walk in front of the locomotive through the area that was inundated with floodwaters. That obviously got CN to call the town to call the province, and then finally that got everybody around the table to start talking about a solution. And really, the solution was quite simple. If you think about like the image is obviously a bucket of water, but we really needed a big bucket or a big bathtub to be able to store the water and hold it until the tide went out, and that way we could get the fresh water back out to sea. So we came up with through our consultants at Englobe and BDA, we came up with a 3-phase plan, which was the first phase was really the purple line that you see. It was really addressing the underground infrastructure and allowing the water to get from point A to point B without obstructions from either collapse pipe or sediment infiltration. Phase 2 was the red pond that you see there, which was a 40,000 cubic meter naturalized stormwater retention pond. In addition to that, we partnered with Ducks Unlimited. You can see where the duck is. So they built a holding compound to hold some of the water around Bridge Street, St. James Street, and the back of the properties on Bennett Street. And then phase 3/4 was a combination of utilizing the Pickard quarry, which you can see up at the top left hand of the image, and building another 40,000 cubic meter retention pond on the south side of the CN tracks, and then eventually dredging a new very deep low slope ditch out to a new abateau at the Tantramar River. So you can see, if you look at the white line in kind of the center of the image and where that currently dumps the water, this channel used to have boats that would come in and load hay. And you can see now that tributary of the Tantramar River has now silted up because of the Bay of Fundy and the tide coming in and pulling that sediment in and really closing up over the years. So our team of engineers felt it was more realistic and from an overall engineered design solution to instead direct the water out to the Tantramar River, where we know that part of the river is never going to silt up. So this is a huge plan. Between just the first two phases, we're at about $9 million. Phase 3 was recently announced, as was the future abateau. So all of the funding is now in place to pull this off. And back when we were doing phases 1 and 2, we acquired all of the property to be able to accommodate this in the future. So if you consider from that red pond out to the end of that blue line, very little of that property was owned by the municipality. So we went out and negotiated through our legal team and through one-on-one meetings with landowners to be able to secure that land for future development. So this was the design of a pond. Serge talked about a wet pond. So that's what we wanted to build, because we have the award-winning Sackville Waterfowl Park, which is just a stone's throw away. So we wanted this to be almost an extension of that. So you can see St. James Street running along the bottom of the image, and then Mona Street running north-south on the right-hand side. So we built almost like a horse track. And that was a 1 to 1.5 meter deep channel, which would sustain aquatic life. So construction started in January. So two important things. We did have to go through an environmental impact assessment for this project, obviously, because it was the lowest part of the drainage base. So it was wet, and it was a poorly functioning manufactured marsh for the most part. So two important conditions in the certificate of determination of the EIA. One was that we had to do winter construction. So that was done specifically to avoid the migratory bird and nesting season. And then secondly was that we weren't allowed to import any topsoil. So as we excavated, we stockpiled the material and saved it. And then as the machinery kind of moved its way out, they just spread that material back over. So the seed bank is the exact same bank that was there when we started the project. So that was what we assumed to be a significant cost at the top, ended up saving from having to replant and import some species that were already there. So winter construction, the rain didn't stop. The ground was frozen. We had heavy machinery out, what we call tamping the soil. So literally multiple bulldozers dragging huge tractor trailer tires to kind of drive that frost in the ground to be able to support the weight of the equipment for construction. Unfortunately, that kind of hard packed the ground, so that when we did get inundated with rain, the entire construction site flooded. So it was a bit of a challenge to explain this to the public as we went along. One of the things that we did, Englobe partnered with BDA, who Serge talked about. BDA is a landscape architecture firm based in Sussex, and they took care of I would say the finesse or the naturalized portion of the pond. While Englobe made sure that it was going to work from an engineering perspective. So those two really helped. And then we went a step further, is that we know we're home to Mount Allison University with a state-of-the-art biology department and some very bright people within that faculty. That we invited some of them, along with some of the nonprofit expertise that we have in this community, to just sit around the table and critique the plans. And one of the suggestions that they had was that instead of the equipment is so sophisticated now that the individual who's operating the excavator can literally smooth that topsoil out. so that it's you know, what you'd expect on your lawn, because everything is handled digitally. Well, they said, don't be scared to just do a rough cut. You know, you don't need to smooth things out. Don't be worried about kind of smoothing out the topsoil when you place it, because what that will do is it will create natural depressions in the pond, and that's where you know, frogs will you know, will grow and flourish. And they were absolutely right. I live in this area of the municipality, and to hear I guess the orchestra of frogs now between the Ducks Unlimited pond and this pond every night is like night and day from what we used to, you know, what we used to have in this part of the community. So Serge talked about the pedestrian trails. So we also did that around the pond. They're not just pedestrian trails; they're also service roads for municipal vehicles, as Serge said. So these ponds will require some maintenance. In this image, you can see the you know, the culverts that allow the water to kind of funnel down through the community and then dump into the pond. And I guess one of the things that BDA did is that they saved or kept these kind of natural refuge areas for mainly for birds. So we worked around those, and that's literally why we dug the kind of that horseshoe shape. So you can see I just got a couple of recent images here of kind of like as it rained and after it rained, and then you can start to see the tide allowing some of that water to move. And similar to what Sarah said, you can start now to see some of the aquatic life coming up. So it's not just an engineering asset. It is a very much so a recreational amenity. It is the amount of birds that have moved into this area. It's now become a very popular spot in the community for birders. We have the M.Sc Middle School using this as a kind of a racetrack for their outdoor gym classes. It's all levels, so it's very accessible, particularly for seniors or anybody who has mobility issues. We added some signage to just let people know and explain, I guess, what it was that we actually constructed, because as Sarah said, these things are very, very expensive, and we wanted this to be very much an educational piece for not just our community, but for other communities, and perhaps some of you on the call today. So with these types of projects, they're large, they're complex, they're expensive, so they are open to criticism, like all parts of municipal business. But I think if we were to now say that we're going to remove this asset from the community, that people would be outraged. And to me, that means that it's really been truly successful. One of the other fun things that we did a public art call, and we wanted to be related to climate change awareness. So this is the Shediac Balance, which was done by Slipperloo Studios out in Vancouver, the same artist as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Ottawa. And this is a piece that they installed shortly after we commissioned the pond. And we've got some interpretive panels there to just explain what it is that the art piece is meant to get people thinking about. And then we were approached by M.Sc to use we have a kind of an obnoxious land use here on the behind the fence. So we got the students to use that as a bit of an art gallery or exhibition space for things to talk about some of the species that are in the pond, whether it's aquatic or reptiles, etc., and just use that as a bit of a showing space. So you can see some of the fun that the students had, and then our public works guys had a blast installing these for them. So just quickly to wrap up in terms of what's next, money's next, because we've now secured the funding for the quarry is now under construction, and the eventual I guess subsequent pond and future connection out to the Bay of Fundy is also underway. So these are the gates that are going to be the types of gates that I'm talking about. You can see the sediment, and you can see even that gate on the right hand side, despite the amount of water, the sediment is still not allowing that to open. So this is the type of infrastructure that really needs to be replaced to allow the water to get out to the bay. And this is our sewage lagoons in Sackville, but soon we're going to have another walking trail to be able to get people out to the mouth of the Tantramar River, where the new Abido will be. And this is essentially going to allow people to follow the stormwater from the point of access into the first pond and walk through the stormwater management project all the way out to the Bay of Fundy. So it is really going to be an incredible education experience for not just students at Mount A or in some of our local schools, but also for other municipalities. And there's other things happening in our region, I guess, from a climate change perspective. I don't think probably everybody on the call is aware of the Shediac Isthmus and the amount of money that's going to be involved to find an eventual solution to protect that critical infrastructure running through the Tantramar. So there's lots of opportunities for this. You can see my dog is also quite appreciative of the not just the retention pond, but also that sunset. So I know that's a lot to get through in 15 minutes or less. So Adam, maybe we could open it up for some questions.
Yeah, thanks.
And Adam, please, if I didn't touch on anything that you specifically wanted, just fire away.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jamie. I think you both touched on a lot of great stuff, and it's nice to see the similarities, but also the differences between the two, particularly with the Aboiteaux and dike system in Sackville and how that kind of changes these types of projects. And also the community aspect of both and those community benefits that we get from undertaking this type of stuff. Because I think in both cases, the other option would have been to dig a really big pond with put a fence around it and have a bunch of rock there. So obviously these are have a lot more asset than that type of approach. But anyway, yeah, we will open it up for questions now. So again, feel free to type some questions in the chat or put up your hand and we can get you off mute to ask either Jamie or Serge your question. But maybe, I know there's a couple that have come in on the chat. So I don't know, Lily, maybe we want to start with one or two of those, then we can see who has some who want to unmute.
Sounds good. There are a couple for Serge to start. The first is, where is the excavated sediment put when in the construction process?
So the sediment, when we do, it is sucked out with a vacuum truck type of thing that's put in the tank of the truck, and they get rid of it, I guess, in an environmentally friendly way. I think they do measure to see if there's any petroleums or whatnot, but I imagine it's got to be taken care of in a you can't just dump it anywhere, I imagine. But it's not a lot of stuff. It's really not that much. We do it every 5-7 years. But yeah, it's you can't just put it anywhere. I guess you got to take care of it.
Great, thank you. And yeah, next question. Merci Serge, très intéressant. Peux-tu nous
It was very interesting. Could you describe to us what incited you to take on this work? Thanks for the question. Yeah, well, of course, 20 years ago, well, yeah, I would say it was the people. Well, I would say that the person who had the idea between sort of he had to convince the administrators and various municipal councillors to do this. And so at the time, there was funding. We weren't a municipality that was kind of like counting our pennies. And so the municipal council was kind of open to this and ready to try new things. And this allowed us to sort of do these kinds of good projects without knowing really what was going to come of it. So, we were able to take this on as a pilot project, and I'm pleased to share this with you today to show you what it looks like. Because at the time, for myself, of course, yeah, I kind of like to know what it's going to look like in the future, and I know that probably it's the same for you. And so, yeah, this is the case here.
Adam, did we want to
Thank you, Serge.
see if there are any questions that people would like to ask loud before we go to the other ones in the chat?
Yeah, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute if you'd like. Yeah, go ahead, Jan. Oh, you're still on mute, actually. There we go.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. Yes, and thank you so much for this presentation. J'aimerais poser la question à Serge.
I'm going to ask my question to Serge. Serge, did the Dieppe municipality know? Well, had you had several infrastructure flooding incidents, or what brought about what brought this about? Because obviously it required a lot of funding to create these stormwater retention basins. So at the time, yes, we had flooding in the marsh on the near Chartersville, so that affected our infrastructure there, our road infrastructure there. But we had, and yes, we had to put in a dike downtown as well. And we also had water bodies where people, the people lived along, and that could be problematic as well. And so, yeah, that was one of the reasons. But the other thing was that we saw at the time that, well, over 20 years ago, we added a bylaw on all new developments that they had to build retention basins, not necessarily naturalized ones, not necessarily dry or wet. We left this choice to the developers, but they had to be able to take on extra flood or stormwater for a certain amount of time. But yes, it wasn't just a question of infrastructure. Like I said, obviously we need to look at this based on, the size of each project. So anyway, we like I said, we passed this new bylaw. I talked about the 10% that the developers had to give back to the city for green spaces, and this is where we could include retention basins, but it wasn't necessary. And Dieppe, the municipality, often recommended not to put these into the green spaces. This is something to do within your development. You had to put your pond in your developed space, and so this wasn't always the case that people would use this that fund. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's better to keep these green spaces for other reasons and not to use those funds for retention basins. That's exactly right.
Great, thanks. Lisa, do you have a question?
Premièrement, merci à vous deux. C'était comme vraiment intéressant comme.
Thanks to both of you. It was a very interesting presentation. And I'm preparing to do a project. I'm the director of an environmental organization to do mapping of ecosystem infrastructures over the coming years. So it's kind of well, good timing in that sense. And so listening to both of you, the following question came up: how do you integrate natural elements into your engineering work or various solutions for these spaces to change your appreciation of these natural elements, which are certainly quality of life aspects from a biologist's perspective and a lover of nature? Well, it's obvious, but I just wanted to know from your perspective what brought you to appreciate these things, and whether this is generally appreciated as well in this type of planning for this type of landscape project. Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah,
I have an
sure.
answer, but I'll let Jamie go.
Yeah, I think I think communities are getting better. There's more awareness being raised. Certainly across in here in New Brunswick, but also throughout Atlantic Canada. But I think it really depends on what the values are of the community. Most communities have an official plan or municipal planning strategy, and a lot now have, climate change adaptation plans. So I think you need to go back to some of those documents and really drill down to find out what are the community values, and then you need to use that as a bit of a springboard as part of the the capital budget planning process. And so the community needs to value it, and then the municipality needs to invest in it. And I think to help convince people, we need to talk about it, right? So hosting, public awareness campaigns about whether it's stormwater management or electric vehicles or whatever the issue may be. I think, that's a very key role that the municipality needs to play to be able to step up and recognize those values, and then help be the one that's going to champion them. Because when you heard Serge talk about how much just the plantings are, and you heard the dollar figure for Sackville's projects, like it's big bucks. So to be able to convince people that, you know, you need to invest in this and, you know, you need to, it's going to make a difference in the quality of life. And it's not just going to be an engineering asset. It's going to be combined with a recreational amenity. I think you need to use that as, you know, as ammunition to help convince decision makers. So it's, I guess, really finding that way to influence without direct control. Serge?
Merci, Jamie. Et à continuer sur le point, Jamie, c'est
So to continue on with Jamie's point, yes, the values of people and communities, and also for myself, it's the people involved. You need people. I'm a little older now. I've gained a little bit of wisdom over my career, but in engineer, I love developing and building, etc., and there are benefits to that. But I'm also a person who loves nature, so. And my boss at the time, Jacques, was the same, but it's not everybody who's like that. So you need to be able to discuss with these people and to help them understand that you can do both at the same time. It doesn't have to be 100% development, or you can always keep a little bit of nature, space for nature to, you know, and it's all in the same goal, right? And you also have to trust that this is going to increase in value over time. A gray infrastructure doesn't, it's kind of put in and that's it, but then a green infrastructure, well, it kind of gains value over time. So I think this is something that we're going to more and more, that the nature is being integrated into these things, and I'm confident this is going to continue.
Great. Thanks both for your responses. I think that we're going to have to wrap up things there, just we're getting close